All right, good evening. It's nice to see those people here and those people online as well. It's a privilege to be back giving Parsha Shiur and Toras Chaim. I remember I used to give them Thursday nights a number of years ago, and it's particularly poignant for me to give this Shiur in the shloshim of my wife's grandmother, Bruria Bashlema. The truth is, grandparents and the role of grandparents comes in this week's Parsha. So Vayechi points out that Yaakov Avinu dies in Parshas Vayechi is often referred to as Zakein, the elderly one. Yichlanu of Zakein, brothers say to Yosef when they're talking to him as the viceroy in Egypt. We have this elderly father. In Chassidus, in Kabbalah, he's called Yaakov Saba. If you're going in the path and following the way of Yaakov Saba, Yaakov our grandfather. And that's because his Vayechi is Yaakov is actually the first Jew, the first of the Avos that interacted with his grandchildren. If you think about it, Abraham, we famously know, died, and Yaakov and Esau were young children, and we see in the Torah no interaction between the two. Yaakov's own children don't necessarily meet Yitzchak, and if they meet Yitzchak, it's not clear for how long. And again, the Torah doesn't report any interaction between Yitzchak and the Shvatim. Yaakov, we see in this week's Parsha, is Simcha Lekim Ephraim and Manasseh. He meets Ephraim and Manasseh. The Medrash he learns with Ephraim. And later on as well, we see with Yosef, the Torah tells us at the end of the Parsha, the idea that Yosef's grandchildren grew up on his knees. And Rav Soloveitchik explains that the role of grandparents is an important one in Judaism. The influence, he writes, I'm quoting, the influence of the grandfathers on their grandchildren was indirect when it comes to the other Avos. However, Yaakov related directly to his grandchildren. He did not need an intermediary or an interpreter. It was a direct dialogue. And he talked about how Yaakov was there to pass over the Shashalas HaMasorah, the idea that, yes, parents can teach information, perhaps, mechanech their children directly, but his grandparents who are the bearers and the torch bearers of the Masorah, right? It says in Sefer Devarim, you should let know you have to make it known to your children and your grandchildren the day you stood before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Chorei. Meaning, transmission of Torah, it's not just the information of Torah, it's also transmission of the experience of Matan Torah, something more broad, something about the Masorah's Klal Yisrael, and that is on the grandparents, just as it is on the grandchildren. And you're right, so very poignantly, today we experience what is popularly referred to a generation gap. Children find no meaning in their parents' experiences. They have difficulty identifying with people, events that took place 20 years earlier. What the difference between generations generally grow with the number of generations that have passed. There's not so with Yiddishkeit. With Judaism, specifically the transmission from grandparents to grandchildren, that collapses the generations. He writes, strikingly, a father can never be certain that his children will transmit his Masorah to their children. We teach our children, we never know whether they'll pass it on to their children. When a grandfather or grandmother teaches their grandchild directly, they are guaranteeing that the chain of Masorah will continue. So I think Lili Nishma Bruria Bashlema, honored to be able to give Share Torah in memory of my wife's grandmother, who definitely did a very good job of passing on that Masorah, that sense of being a part of Masorah's Yisrael to her grandchildren. I wanted to study, I know those who are here have the text, those who don't, I'm not able to share the source sheet on the Zoom, but we're going to learn the last bit of the Parsha, Perek Nun, Pasuk Yudala to Kaf Aleph. So this is after the burial of Yaakov, right? Yaakov's instructed Yosef and his brothers to bury him back in Canaan, Ma'aras Machpelah. And then we'll read together, Yosef Mitzrayim Hu ve'echav v'chol ha'olim mito. Yosef returns to Egypt, he and his brothers, all who went up with him. They went up to bury their father. After they buried their father, they returned back to Egypt. The brothers of Yosef see that their father has died. And they say, Yosef. Perhaps Yosef bears a grudge. Perhaps Yosef hates us. And perhaps he's going to repay us for all the evil that we have done to him. right? We, after all, sold him down, callously down to Egypt. And look, maybe he didn't do something to us all the while our father was alive. He didn't want to hurt his father. Just like Esau said, I'm not going to kill Yaakov when Yitzchak's still alive. Maybe similarly, they thought Yosef wasn't going to take revenge on us all the while Yaakov was alive. And now Yaakov's gone, perhaps Yosef's going to repay the evil we perpetrated against him. But he said, well, Yosef lame up. So they came up with the ruse, they came up with a plan. They commanded about Yosef saying, or to Yosef, we've got a command from our father, from Yaakov, either a command or tzavor, a will, testimony will, from our father before he died, saying as follows. So you should say to Yosef, please forgive the sin of your brothers, their iniquity, because they paid back evil to you. Similarly again, forgive the sins of the servants of your father. And Yosef cried when he spoke, when he heard that they had spoken such to him. It's interesting here, the expression of Sa'ana Pesha and Sa'ana echoes, right, of the honor Hashem, Sa Pesha, of the Kohen Gadol when he asked for forgiveness from HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Sachs famously has a few pieces on really Yosef is the first place we find formal forgiveness in the Torah. It's not the first place we find someone who asked to be forgiven, but this is the most explicit place, and using this language we're most used to, the language of teshuvah, the formal language of vidu, of confession. And Yosef is the first person, human, to forgive his brothers. So this is clearly what's going on in this passage here. So we'll see in the following pasukim, they ask for forgiveness, and he forgives. Vayechi critiques actually this usage of language of forgiveness, of kapara by the brothers to Yosef, but this is really unique between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A human can never really fully forgive the acts of another human, meaning because the acts of another human have ramifications well beyond the ability for any human to be in control of, or to be able to forgive on. God can forgive all the ramifications, all the ripple effects, not so necessarily with the human. So Yosef cries. So they sent as a message. Now they go themselves to beseech Yosef, and they fall in front of him. He said, look, we'll be for you for servants. Basically, we'll do anything. Just don't take revenge. Don't be afraid. Am I instead of God? Very interesting, actually. The Medrash Tanchuma picks up on where's the other time we say Hasachas Elokim? Who else says Tachas Elokim Ani? Am I the instead of God? Am I godlike? Am I in God's place? Anyone here?
Yaakov.
Yeah. Someone online. Yeah, Yaakov to Rachel. Very interesting. Yosef's mother, right? Yosef's mother cries out to her husband, I have no children. Give me a child. Daven be like your father, Daven, Yitzchak. For his wife who was barren. And Yaakov responds, Hasachas Elokim Ani. Am I instead of God? And in a callous way, and the Medrash Tanchuma critiques Yaakov. And it turns into now Rachel's son says it back to Yaakov's other children. They asking for forgiveness, or they're asking, please don't harm us. And in the flip way, he uses Hasachas Elokim rather than being a callous response, like, I can't help you. I'm not God. Yosef says, I'm not God. I can't punish you. I can't hurt you. It's a very interesting parallel here, the intertextuality. We become quite popular today in many places, and some people like it, some people don't like it, but it's very interesting. The Medrash itself picks up on this unique usage of the word Hasachas Elokim in these two passages. I guess a beautiful Yosef really reframes the whole experience, and not for tonight, but this is also an important theme of these parshas, both Vayigash, when he reveals himself to the brothers, and also now at the end of parshas Vayechi, how Yosef reframes his whole experience. Well, it was for him something tremendously traumatic. Clearly for Yosef, not an easy trial. Nonetheless, he's able to see it coming out the other side. He's able to see it in a new light, right? Moshe asked to see God. What does God reply to Yosef, to Moshe? You can't see my face. You can only see my achara. You can only see me from behind. The Hasidic others explain, meaning Moshe wants to see God's face. He wants to see things forward facing. He wants to see them before they've happened. He wants to understand events whilst they're happening or before they've happened. God says, as a human being, we can never understand the world in that way. But what you can see is acharai. After the event, you can look back after it's happened, you can look back. And if you have the right perspective, you can hopefully try to make sense of things. This Yosef does after everything that transpired. Now he's obviously achieved what he has in life and arrived in the place he has. He's able to see things in a new light, and that's what he's able to express to his brothers. Say, you thought you were doing something evil, rather God had all planned out for the world good. In order I'll be able to stay sane. Don't be afraid. I will sustain you. Interesting from Yosef's answer, we see perhaps what triggers their initial worry is, why did the brothers think now that Yosef was going to take revenge? Yes, that they'd returned from the death of their father, but the Medrashim, again, picking up on Achalka, that's how I'm going to sustain you, is that till then Yosef had frequented his brothers and his father in Goshen. He'd ate with them, he'd wined and dined them. And suddenly on the return from the burying, once Yaakov was no longer alive, and it's so often, sadly, so often happens that a pivotal family member passes away, a grandparent or something that brings the family together. In their absence, suddenly Yosef wasn't so interested in the rest of the family anymore. Suddenly he wasn't with them. He had a good reason to do so, we'll see, but they perhaps thought, well, Yosef's not feeding us, or he's not coming to spend time with us. Perhaps he's now bearing a grudge, and therefore he calms their worries, and he says, no, I will give you to eat. So it's really interesting passage, what's going on here. The worry of the brothers and the response of Yosef. The first question really is, did Yaakov even know what the brothers had done to Yosef? Right, that is seemingly the basis of the text here, right? The brothers say, our father gave us a message that you should everyone go page 1. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the fathers gave, the brothers gave, the brothers claim that the father gave them a message that he should forgive them for the sin that they had done. But it's not clear that Yaakov even knew that the brothers had ever sold the earth. So it's really interesting, machlokas, different approaches in the Rishonim. So we have here the Das Zakenim, Vayomer Yosef. It's Yosef said, Vayomer Yosef, sorry, in the beginning of the Parsha, right? Yaakov's dying, Yaakov gets ill. And it's the Torah tells us, it was said to Yosef, it was reported to Yosef. Ephraim was spending time with Yaakov. Yaakov got ill, he reports back to Yosef. Okay, then look at the bolded. Implication is the fact that Yosef had to be sent for. Yosef wasn't around. Yosef wasn't local. Yosef wasn't visiting his father. Seems to be that Yosef wasn't regularly in contact with his father. Yaakov, when he wants to instruct Yosef about burying him in Eretz Mitzrayim, the first bit of our parasha, he has to call to Yosef, he has to send to him. Again, Yosef's not local, Yosef's not there, he's not popping in all the time. Yosef was afraid. Yosef didn't spend time with his father Yaakov all those years in Mitzrayim. He was scared that Yosef, Yaakov, in conversation one day would say to him, wait a minute, what happened when I sent you to check out on your brothers in Shechem and you didn't come home? And they brought me home this bloody coat. They told me Torah Yosef's been torn apart. And yet, 22 years later, I'm here, you're still alive, you're in Egypt. What happened on that fateful day? He would then have to tell his father what happened, that his own brothers sold him. And Yaakov would curse out the brothers. And we see the power of Yaakov's curse. Yaakov curses Rachel inadvertently, right? When Lavan says, who stole my idols, my trophim? And Yaakov says, well, whoever did it should be killed. You see the power of Yaakov's curse. Yosef was worried if he would hang around Yaakov, he would have to tell Yaakov what happened, that his brother sold him down to Egypt, and Yaakov would curse his brother. And therefore, to save himself, after having to reveal the secret to Yaakov, Yosef keeps away. Seemingly, according to the Das Zakenim, the Psik, the Rabbah, says similar thing, the same the Ramban. We won't go through all of them inside, but Ramban again says the same thing, that Yaakov was totally unaware. He managed to go his whole life unaware. The Ramban does put the onus as well on Yaakov. That Yaakov never asked. I mean, even if he had an inkling something was awry here, something was amiss, how could Yosef suddenly turn up 22 years later alive, well, and the vice needed? Something must have happened. Something clearly didn't go down as the brothers had reported it. Clearly wasn't killed that day by wild animals. Nonetheless, Yaakov never asked. Yaakov preferred to remain in the dark. And the Torah makes the comment here on Vayechi Yosef, on the passage we read. Yosef cried. That's why he was crying. Yosef cried because he knew full well that he had never told his father, and he knew full well that the brothers never told their father. They weren't going to admit to Yaakov. That was a fault. It was really, the onus was on them to tell Yaakov. They are the one who perpetrated. They had lied to Yaakov. It was on them to admit it. It wasn't Yosef's place to. He'd made that mistake before. The Dibarah. He'd brought back the evil reports to his father once before. He'd a changed person. He wasn't going to want to spill the beans. It was on them. So he knew he hadn't told, and he knew that his brothers hadn't told. And that's why Yosef came as we know. Yeah, he cries because he knows they're lying to him. They've had to concoct this whole white lie because of their fear of what would happen. On the flip side, there are many Mefarshim who say Yaakov was aware. For instance, Rashi comments when Yaakov blesses / curses Shimon and Levi in this week's parsha. And he says one of the things that they did evil was their will to uproot a ox. How does Rashi understand it? They wanted to uproot Yosef, who's called the shor. Like in the blessing of Moshe, to the sheva of Yosef later on in the he refers to Yosef as a shor. So Rashi understands Yaakov was cursing Levi and Shimon, the main architects of the sale of Yosef, seemingly that Yaakov was aware. Similarly, they in Ibn Ezra on the pasuk regarding the brachas to Yosef. It says, the pasuk says, "Vayimaru v'robu vayistemuhu." I don't have the full verse. What's the vayistemuhu? Muktam kodam vayimaru ki'ilu ama v'chavei satmu v'zer remez al ochish shemachru. Again, Ibn Ezra said this is a hint to the brothers that wanted to sell him, that did sell him. This was part of the description of Yaakov in his bracha to Yosef, describing that difficult life Yosef had gone through. One of the difficulties is Vayistemuhu, is the brothers wanted to sell him. Similarly, Heimek Dava understands Vayistemehu Ba'alei Chitzim, and he without going into the detail, the Targum includes this type of hatred in the heart. This is like the brothers. Unlike the brothers, they didn't hate Yosef in the heart, but they actually perpetrated evil upon him. Again, according to the Netziv here in his commentary, Yaakov is referencing the sale of Yosef. Again,
did you say that the Chayrim was still in place, perhaps? The Chayrim the brothers made at the time.
Yeah, the Medrash says there's a Chayrim that no one should tell Yaakov, and that's why Yitzchak was barred from telling. Yeah, it's interesting. Perhaps the Chayrim, whatever that means, was still in place, or simply Yosef had no reason to tell, and the brothers wasn't in their interest to tell. No, I tell you why the Chayrim wasn't in place. If I remember correctly, the Chayrim was predicated on the fact that the brothers were convinced that they had done al pi adin, right? The brothers were convinced that what they had done, I think the Chayrim is they sat in Beis Din, right? If I remember this, if it's the same Medrash, that they sat in Beis Din and they put Yosef on trial for whatever his crime was. So the Mefarshim, a lot of the Mefarshim understand in last week's Parsha, Kinivhanu miponov, what was the shock? Why were the brothers speechless when Yosef reveals himself? This is a beautiful piece. I think this is in Minchas Asher, the Sichas of Rosh Weiss, is the whole edifice. They had built themselves a whole, intellectual, palace, that they had reasoned and they had thought they had done the right thing, and they put him into a Beit Din Torah, and they had come with a basin of 10 in Kudu Kadosh Baruch, where they said we've done the right thing, and therefore no one's to reveal what we've done. But that was all clearly proven wrong in the span of history. Yosef surviving and the dreams coming true in the end, and bowing down to Yosef. It seems to be that it was shown retrospectively that what they had done was a mistake. It's interesting that the brothers ask forgiveness, but we see they don't get a full forgiveness, because we see in later generations Asar Harugei Malchus and other things are attributed to the sale of Yosef. yes, we see that there's the Rashbam as well. Vayimaru barobu mitoshin not eshes poitifai now boishi chubeisa. So sorry. So the Rashbam we see understands this verses, but the Emek Dova and the Ibn Ezra and Rashi, or Ibn Ezra and Emek Dova understand to be a reference to the sale of Yosef. The Rashbam sees not. He explains it's all to do the difficulties Yosef experienced were to do with the wife of Potiphar and overcoming that trial, that test, and not necessarily a reference to the sale of Yosef by his brothers. Possibly that's Rashbam Nishitaso, because Rashbam held that it wasn't the brothers who sold Yosef. They maybe wanted to save Yosef. It was the Midianim that sold Yosef. So again, we see there's two schools of thoughts here, whether Yaakov was anyway aware of Yosef's sale or not aware of Yosef's sale, which clearly underpins this whole portion in the end of Beresh. But what I wanted to see in the last few minutes we have is this piece from Simcha Buna of Peshischa. So I think that's on the bottom source here on the second side, and go to the second column and read like this. Venira, third line down. What was going on? What was going on between Yosef and the other Shvatim? Shechashvu, this understands, and through this, Rasim Kabbanim explains the initial sale of Yosef and now the reconciliation between him and the brothers. They thought, just like Shemizera Avram Yitzchak Nivcha Chilek Echol Hashem Asher Bocha Liskulosai, Begam Yotzam Mehem Sharum Hashem Pesulas. Just as with the descendants, the children of Avram and the children of Yitzchak, some of the children were chosen to be the continuation of the Messiah, and some were cast aside. Yitzchak was chosen, Esav was cast aside. And Yishmael was cast aside. Yaakov was chosen, and Esav was cast aside. So too, when the brothers saw Yaakov showing favoritism to Yosef, they thought the same thing. Yosef was going to be the fourth Aves, the fourth father. He was going to be the continuation of the Messiah, and all of them would be the Esavs and the Yishmaels of their generation. However, and that was true. They thought perhaps all the way along. They thought they had solved the issue by selling Yosef, getting rid of Yosef, getting rid of the chosen son, and giving Yaakov, forcing the hand. Well, now it has to be others, or all of them, or others of them to be the Messiah. 22 years later, Yosef turns back up. He's reunited. Yosef is the leader of the family again. It's not clear that it's not going to be Yosef. Maybe Yosef is Taka, the continuation. However, Yaakov on his deathbed, Yaakov just gives them all brachas. And he gives them brachas, each one according to their level, each one according to their tafkid, each one according to their unique midos, their unique characteristics, their unique legacy that they have to give to Klal Yisrael. Then they realize, then they recognize this generation is different. It's mitosei shlema. Yaakov is the one his entire family was going to be the continuation of the Messiah. So what were they saying to Yosef? They say to Yosef, understand, our sin was not callous, our sin was not pure cruelty. Our sin of sending you away was done out of a desire that we wanted to be the chosen ones. We wanted to be the Yitzchaks, the Yaakov. We wanted to be the ones who were going to continue Mesiras Yisrael, and not you. Because he also thought that perhaps this is what was going on. He also thought this was a survival of the fittest, not physically but spiritually, that really only one of the children was going to merit to be the continuation of Yaakov. And now, it's specifically here, the death of Yaakov, after he's given the brachas on his deathbed, demonstrating that all of them are worthy to be part of Klal Yisrael, that they're able to have this reconciliation. At this moment, they were able to say, well, understand, when we sold you, we did it with this intention because we wanted to be the continuation. And he says, well, I also thought, this was what's going on, and we're able to reconcile, we're able to forgive one another at that moment. It's interesting. By avoid going ha'atat, when they bury Yaakov, right, they come to a place called Gorin Ha'atat, and there they make a big mispeh gadol, a big eulogy and mourning. What's Gorin Ha'atat? What's this place Gorin Ha'atat? The Rashi says Mukaf Hatodin Haya. Okay, it's a reason for the place, but he brings a medrash, Gemara and Sota. It's something that happened there. So they were going there to bury Yaakov. They were on the way to Canaan to bury Yaakov, and the kings of Canaan and the princes of Ishmael came for war. They wanted to fight Bnei Yaakov. When they saw the crown of Yosef on the coffin of Yaakov, they all stood back. They put their crowns around, and their crowns surrounded the coffin of Yaakov, just like a threshing floor is crowned by thorns, I guess to protect it from animals. This crown is the surrounding of thorns. It was surrounded by crowns. What's going on here? Who does Rashi say? What the Gemara says? Malchi Canaan Ishmael. Canaan and Ishmael were both descendants, these were the descendants of two people who were rejected by their father. Canaan is the son of Cham. Cham rejected by Noach, rather goes through Shem and Yafes to an extent. Yishmael rejected by his father, Avram, sent away in favor of Yaakov. Again, they held the grudge. They, like the brothers, felt, somehow they were rejected. What did they see? They see the Kisrei Shel Yosef. This is Rav David Fuhrman's idea. Beautiful. They see the Kisrei Shel Yosef. They see the crown of Yosef. They see Yosef, a rejected son by his brothers, now being reconciled with them. Yosef given a second chance, being once again brought back into the fold. They stand back. Malchi Canaan and the Sei Yishmael, descendants of rejected personalities in Jewish history, take the example from this, and maybe there's hope for us. Maybe at some point we will be able to be reunited. And this idea of the Simcha Bunim of Peshischa brings, that this idea that they all thought they had to be the single continuation of Klal Yisrael, but Yaakov on his deathbed reveals that no, each of you are different. He gives them all a different bracha. They each have a different personality. They each bring something different to Klal Yisrael, but yet together they're going to be Mitosei Shleim. I think it's an important theme of the idea that each of the tribes are unique, but together they create Klal Yisrael. And so they take a few interesting points in this week's Parsha. Yaakov says he gathers the children together on his deathbed, because Yaakov was expressing the essence of Knesset Yisrael. Like Ramban says, right, Knesset Yisrael connotes a community of contradictions, of mutually exclusive ideas and people. They were so different. Yaakov and Yosef, Yehuda and Yosef, Reuven and Yosef, these really different people. Yisachar and Zebulun, diametrically opposed. Nonetheless, together they create, with their different skills, their different traits, they represent the wholeness of Knesset Yisrael. Again, the idea of Yehuda is appointed to be a king, but a king doesn't stand above the people. But the Rambam writes in Hilchos Melachim is Kedei la'achad es emosenu. When you have such disparate and different types of people who could pull in different directions, all for the L'Shem Shamayim, all because they have genuinely something very different to bring to the party. But with so many voices, a plethora of voices, you don't have anything holding it together. Yehuda, you need a kingship, you need a monarchy, not to stand above, aloof from the people, but to unite the people, to bring the people together, to create a confluence of the different talents, the different approaches, the different thoughts and emotions of the various parts of Klal Yisrael. The Torah stresses, Yaakov gives each one their unique bracha, because Yaakov's recognized, again, each of them are different, each of them have something unique to share, and that's how it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to be monolithic. To be a Jew doesn't mean everyone has to be the same, and everyone has to do everything exactly like each other. We're bound by a common set of halacha, but there's so much area for unique expression, for different ways of doing things, unique expressions on Avodas Hashem, and that's already here founded in the blessings that Yaakov gives his children. And finally, Avicha Siva Lifnei Moso. The brothers come to Yosef and they say, our father commanded before he died that you should forgive us. So Vayechi comments, the blessings to his sons before his death, Yaakov had expressed the vision of their merger into a unified Klal Yisrael. And the brothers were saying, wait a minute, Yosef, if you do something now to jeopardize that, if you take revenge, if you somehow thwart that unity, you're going to thwart the continuity of Klal Yisrael. That's Maharal writes, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, right? That's what the brothers say to Yaakov on his deathbed. He thinks maybe one of you are not roy for the blessing. They say, no, listen, Yisrael, our Father. Hashem Echad. The word Echad is an acronym for Echad. Is one refers to Yaakov, Ches refers to the sons of the 8 sons of Rachel and Leah, and Daled refers to the 4 sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And together, Echad, Yaakov, with his 4 sons his 8 sons from Rachel and Leah, and the 4 sons from Bilhah and Zilpah, together Echad, each of them with their diversity and their difference, comprise the Echad, the Achdus, not just HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the Achdus of Am Echad, the one people, Knesset Yisrael. Thank you.
Oh yeah, Shmuli.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Shkoyach.
And good evening, good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Shkoyach.
Thank you.